Well, if you've been watching my videos for a little while, you may notice that I have set up a Patreon account, and at the end of every video I have a scroll of all the people that have become patrons, and I do appreciate all of them. And let's see, there's Tim and Karen, Ryan B. Demented, David Sparling, Mike Reed, Anthony, Gaston, and Arthur. Those are the ones who have already become patrons, and I do thank you from the bottom of my heart for helping out. And it's not mandatory to become a patron. If you'd like to help me out with admission fees and fuel and all the expenses of me traveling around, for as little as $1 a month, it would help me a lot. And I do appreciate all of you who are already patrons and those of you who are going to be or thinking about it. So let's get into today's video, and just think of this as patrons as it being a tip jar. Hello YouTube. Today I'm in Lyons, Kansas at the Coronado and Quivira Museum. And to get an idea, here's a nice painting of Coronado. We've all heard of him in history class and whatnot, but he was exploring the Southwest looking for the 7 cities of gold, which of course he never found because they didn't exist. But Quivira was the name that members of the Coronado expedition applied to the native villages they explored in central Kansas in about 1541. And we've got a collection of grinding slabs and tools to work flint, and as well as some pretty cool knives and cutting, and there's a whole mess of arrowheads. I'll show you those in a second. So here's a collection of a lot of the arrowheads that this one man collected and has loaned to the museum here. And I said Quivira was the name that they gave to the Wichita and associated tribes, and Quivira was the name that they gave to what we know now as the Wichita and associated tribes. And this would have been, this is a reproduction of a typical house that they would have lived in, dug down into the earth a little bit. So, you know, a nice backrest to sit on, and sleeping furs and central fire. And of course, when the weather was good, they would do the work outside of, that's how they're grinding the corn and whatnot. Now, if you've been following my videos for a while, you may remember me visiting the Snake Intiago out near Parker, Arizona. Well, there's one here too. Also prehistoric, and here's a couple of aerial photos of it. It looks like be much wider and than the one in Parker. So this area is where the headwaters of the Little Arkansas River are, and near that area in the sandstone, a lot of petroglyphs have been carved. It's sort of cool. Now, Coronado wasn't the first Spaniards to visit Kansas. There was the Humana expedition, which was illegal, and I believe I mentioned that a couple of videos back when we were down at the Land Run Museum. But 1940, when Dr. Weddell from the Smithsonian came out here, he found this fragment of Spanish chain mail. And here's some more little pieces. They figure that was from that first expedition in 1541, and here's a Spanish battle axe. And that, that expedition was in 1583, and it was totally wiped out by the natives, except for one Mexican Indian who returned and was able to tell what happened to the expedition. And this reproduction is what the chainmail would have looked like back then. They had separate sleeves of chainmail. So some of the other weapons that the Spaniards would have carried would have, of course, been a sword and crossbows and matchlock rifles. That's where they had the burning wick would come down, and the would have been a typical crossbow bolt up there, and the plate of armor. And of course, this matchlock would be so heavy that they've had this kind of pole to help support it. And of course, a dagger. Of course, Coronado had priests along on his expedition, and this copper cross was found in a plowed field about 4 miles west and a mile south of Lyons, behind where the Father Pillar cross stands today. It may date back to the 16th century, and so it could have been on that expedition. Now, if you remember from the video about Fort Osage, that was where the Santa Fe Trail started, and it did come through this area, and along the way there was all kinds of artifacts they've got here from that era. So nearby is the crossing of Cow Creek, and some early travelers laid down stones to make the crossing a little easier, and I guess when the water is low you can see them. And these were found at the stone corral in the area, nice little bits and pieces, and I recognize a few mini balls and just general pieces of lead. Sit down in the basement. They've got a display of, I think they called it 1902, a little bit about the local salt mine and the various interesting artifacts from the bygone era of the 1900s. Well, they've got a very rare 1912 Detroiter, and the story behind this is that in the 1950s, one of the businessmen found this in a crate, unassembled, in a Colorado mountain town, and using the instructions, and he put it all together, and this is, and so, well, at that point, he had a brand new never driven antique. I got to start poking around in some Colorado mountain ghost towns and see what I can find. I doubt if I'll ever find anything this cool. They got all kinds of tools, woodworking and machining or motor vehicle tools. And here's a valve grinder. Probably Badge has one of those. And I actually used to have 3 of those of different grits. Not the valve grinder. Badge would have that. The grinding wheels. A little hard to use those because you're cranking with one hand and trying to hold the tool you're grinding with the other hand. It really would help to have my son crank it. All right, I think with the Detroiter here, I am going to get back on the road, see what I can find. The cost to get into this museum was $3, which is not bad. Some very interesting exhibits, and I will go find a spot for the night and see what I can find tomorrow. See you later, YouTube.